Okay, great. Thank you, Doug. And it's great to be here in Washington. And it's an interesting time to be here in Washington, isn't it? I don't know if you've heard that there's actually an election happening.
Just a little one.
I've heard it. I just heard it on the news. And the kind of interesting thing about that is that very soon a great deal will change. One way or the other, it will change, and we're going to have to move with that. But I'll share it's not unique to government. Really, every industry in the United States and across the globe is undergoing a massive change right now. And everyone's wrestling with this. And to paint a bit of a picture, I want to do a bit of a poll here. Who in the room uses an Apple device, if you could raise your hand? Quite a lot. Who here in the room has an Android device? All right, we'll call you the outliers. Anyone here own a Galaxy 7? Okay,
Very smart, good.
I was going to call security, but we're safe. The exits are to the rear and side of the aircraft.
Fire extinguishers over there.
Yeah. So if you noticed anything recently on your devices, whether it's an Android device or an Apple device, it's doing something very helpful to you recently. It's starting to push you information whether you asked for it or not. It's telling you, hey, by the way, you have a meeting coming up, but you might want to leave kind of now if you're going to want to get there on time. And if you think about it, you didn't ask for that information. It thought it might be of value to you individually. It used data. It inferred things about you individually, and it said, here, this might be helpful to you. And we're building an experience here, and this experience is going to translate into us as businesses. How about Uber? Who here has taken an Uber in the last 30 days? Got to buy stock in Uber. Okay? So if you think about that experience with Uber, we're gravitating to this frictionless experience, aren't we? It's just right there. And it's not just that it's, people like to say that Uber is great because, look, I can actually call a cab right from my phone. You could always call a cab from your phone. This is not the major advance here. The major advance is they've healed a broken experience. The journey that you're seeing on that slide there, they've healed that experience. And they've taken something that was a void of transparency. You didn't know where you stood when you called a cab. You're on the street corner in the freezing cold or in the rain, wondering if that cab was ever going to show up. They made it transparent. You can actually see the driver's going the wrong direction down the road. Okay? We can do these types of abilities in our processes in government as well. How about Amazon? Who here has shopped on Amazon in the last month? Wow. How about Amazon Prime? Oh, my gosh, I had no idea. So, again, what have they done really? If you ran out of batteries, you could go to the store and get it a lot faster than you can get it on Amazon Prime. Okay? That's not what it's about. It's about taking the weight off of your shoulders. You can just, what's called cognitive offloading. You can just press this on your phone, you're done. It's just going to happen. You don't have to worry about it anymore. They're making it easier for you. Your journey as an individual has been healed. Now, here's what the challenge is for everybody in this room. Everyone in this room is a constituent, is a customer. And after you interact with Amazon, where everything is easy, after you interact with Uber and all these other brands that we're talking about here, the next interaction might be with your agency. And the expectation on the part of your constituents is that you're able to deliver an experience that should live up to the same. It's called the last best experience. Your measuring stick is the last best experience that individual has had. It's something called competitive convergence that every industry is feeling. It's not specific to agencies. It's being felt by telecommunications carriers, by banks, by retailers, and on and on. Their competitors are no longer their direct competitors when it comes to experience. It is the last best experience that each individual has had. And it's only going to get tougher. There's going to be somebody else that reinvents something else and is the next Uber, the next Amazon Prime. So this is what we're here to talk about today. It's about change and how empowered consumers are changing things for us and what we have to deliver. Which takes us to setting the stage for today. And it's more than just experience. We've always had to focus on effectiveness and getting it right, all right, delivering the services that we're challenged to provide as agencies. Over recent years, we've been challenged more and more to become more efficient, to weed costs out of our processes. I think of this as removing the friction within the business. Now with this new advance, the challenge becomes, how do we remove the friction for the constituent in their experience? It's a different thing than we've had to think about in the past. What makes this so interesting is these 3 E's, they've existed for a while, but we almost treated them in isolation. These circles did not overlap. We had projects that focused on efficiency. We had projects that focused on effectiveness. We had projects that may or may not get funded that focus on experience. And what I want you to focus on this slide is the overlap. If we can find intersections between efficiency and experience, where we're removing friction for both the business and the constituent, those are the golden opportunities. And my gosh, if they can actually address all 3, those are the golden nuggets that we have to be looking for. And we're going to talk about examples of these as we go through today's entire session.
So while you may actually have an executive order from the White House to make this a mandate, but you're actually not alone, because businesses know that the difference between having a good customer experience delivered through great customer service can make or break a brand, essentially. Forrester actually estimates that 71% of the businesses that they surveyed as a part of the annual Customer Experience Index have made CX a significant focus for their organization. And they're seeing the efforts on focusing that customer experience actually paying off. They're seeing improvements within the index between 2015 as well as 2016. And what's most amazing about this is that from a breakthrough perspective, guess which industry is taking the lead? It's you, government, right? With agencies like IRS launching a mobile app to provide greater, faster refund capabilities. So again, you're not alone, and everybody is focused on this. So let's take a moment and talk a little bit about this customer expectations pyramid, right? So to be able to deliver service is what I call this kind of gray area down here, where your constituents should be able to come to you and expect that you have a way of providing them support, whether it's through telephone or through the web, some kind of capability to connect them with you when it comes to needs. So we really look at that from a foundational perspective. And the challenge here is that there's a lot of emerging channels as well as devices that are coming up every single day. So the race that you have is trying to figure out this latest device that's coming out from a mobile perspective. How do you make sure you deliver the great experience? But the problem is, as you're keeping pace with the technology itself, you almost never get to this upper part of the pyramid, which is really what differentiates a good experience to a great one, where your constituents not only feel like their needs are being met fully, they're actually feeling like they're getting more than what they expected from you. And at the end of the day, they feel like you value them as a constituent. And so getting to that meaningful experience is a really big challenge. And so I think we're going to take a quick survey right now just to kind of see where you guys are at in terms of your thinking. So how would you describe where your agency is currently? How many people would say that you're in the gray zone? Raise your hand if you're in the gray zone. And how many of you would you say that you're in the green zone? Great. So, I think we talked a lot about how private sector with Amazon is taking the lead in terms of delivering that green level experience. So I actually want to talk about an agency that I came across that is really being looked to in terms of the leader in delivering at that apex of the pyramid. So when I saw from the Forrester report that National Park Service has the highest customer experience score, I was really curious, right? So I decided, since I think Columbus weekend was a couple of weekends ago, I said, you know what, let's give the National Park Service a try, right? What's so special about this experience that they're talking about? So I went to the website and I said, okay, you know what, I'm gonna find a park. And having had prior experiences looking at other agency websites, I thought that if I try to search for a park within Massachusetts, but then if I wanted to switch gears and look at a park in Seattle, I thought I was gonna get redirected to a different site. But I didn't. Those guys at the NPS, they kill me. So let's go to the next slide. Not only did I not get redirected to another state's website to look for the park, where the information is completely consistent, they actually exceeded my expectation. They suggested, hey, these are some of the activities or ways that you can look at parks. You want to go leaf peeping? Great, I'm from New England, so this is a great opportunity to go leaf peeping, right? You want to find heritage. You want to find history. So again, I was completely delighted, and it absolutely exceeded my expectation, even though I was trying to catch the NPS and say, oh, I know they're going to redirect me to like 50 billion different websites. They did not. One level deeper. So now they really got me. So they're celebrating the 100-year anniversary. And instead of, kind of splashing the 100-year symbol all over their website and whatnot, they talk about connecting your experience, parks that you feel a connection with, and share it with them on social media. So again, this is just one channel that I explored, where I went from looking for a park so I can do something with my son over the weekend, to this really delightful experience where I became really proud of this country that I live in, that I want to experience America. So I completely bought into the whole experience that they're trying to deliver. And you can get there, right? And here is a leader in terms of delivering that great experience.
Absolutely. By the way, do we have anyone from the TSA at all in the room? No, that's unfortunate. I think that's another great example of an organization that pivoted and delivered really not just convenient, but meaningful experience. They kind of went from worst to first in that sense. Does anyone use TSA Pre in the room? How great is TSA Pre? All right. Or Global Entry is another good example. They took one of the most friction-filled, worst experiences that probably existed, worst, brand reputation at the time, and turned it into actually a great experience. One that I actually remember tweeting quite a bit about when it was launched. So what they did is identified points of friction and found ways through process to smooth those out and focus on the back end and the front end process. So a great other example of how organizations are getting it done. So, we're painting a bit of a rosy picture here. And everybody in the room knows that there are things keeping you from the things that you want to do. I want to talk about those first, to put those on the table. And I'll share that these are challenges that every organization from every industry is feeling at the moment. They're particularly pronounced in government. So let's talk about these. The first one is the digital-first constituent. Whenever I have a thing I'm trying to look up, hours of operation, I have a quick inquiry, I actually don't pick up the phone first. I do what this person on the screen is doing, and I tend to use the website. Would anyone else say that they also identify with that? Okay, quite a bit. And that's pretty representative. In fact, 86% will go to the website first to try and find the information. And what that really means is they're trying to use your most efficient channels, the ones that don't cost you as much money, all right? But they're having trouble finding that information. It's not made available in a way that's easily identifiable. The journey that we're talking about here is not built around how they want to consume the information, it's built around how we can put it out there, all right? And so that results in that call to the contact center often.
You definitely see this reflected. So when we look at this chart of where the interactions are moving from a customer engagement perspective, you'll notice the shift from the traditional call center approach to more self-service driven channel. And what we're seeing is that a lot of the technologies are actually starting, especially around this concept of a messaging platform. Either using text or chat or artificial intelligence, people are leveraging these messaging platforms to communicate with each other or also collaborate. And in fact, our president is so hip. Did you know that President Obama actually has a chatbot on his Facebook page? So remember how he reads 10 messages from the country? So basically, he actually has a Facebook chatbot right now that takes the questions directly from the population, so that he can actually use that as a way of actually self-servicing himself, right? So again, the interaction is moving more and more towards this idea of self-service. And the idea here is, how do you remove that friction to make it easy for people to do what they need to do quickly?
Absolutely. And we're going to spend some time on that later, going in much greater detail. The second one is this picture here. Now, aside from the fact that phone has a cord on it, and there's one extra kid, this is my kitchen. And I don't know if anyone else relates to this picture. We are busy. We have a lot to do every day. And we're trying to get it all done. We're trying to juggle all these things. And you can see they're trying to go to the digital channel first, now forced to pick up that phone and call. And what is the result? Well, we are resource constrained. We don't have all the bodies we wish we could throw at the problem. We want to be helping everybody. The minute they call, we're right there answering. It's just not possible. It's not possible. It's not unique to government at all. Every industry is feeling that. So the result is frustration on the part of the citizen when they're kind of held in that little digital waiting room of IVR, because there's no value coming to them. But it's also frustrating for your employees. They don't enjoy the fact that this person has just been on hold for 15 minutes, and now they have to start from scratch and figure out why are they calling and start from scratch there. When they probably already started that interaction right there on the web as you're seeing. And we're going to talk about ways that brands can actually bring those together and start to heal a bit of these friction-filled experiences.
So how many of you would you say that more than 50% of the way that you deliver your service today, or even internal processes from an operations perspective, are primarily paper? 50%? 60%? 70%? 80%? I'm kind of getting scared. Let's go lower. Would you say 20%? Anybody in the 20% zone? Okay, wow. So again, you're not alone in terms of having paper and manual intensive processes. And that's why at Pega we have a lot of customers that tell us the initiatives that they're taking on to automate a lot of this paper and manual process, right? So popularity around OCR technologies, where you're basically scanning the paper and lifting the data, as well as using technologies like robotic automation to basically bridge across these systems. But the challenge is paper and manual processes, even with automation technologies by themselves, still doesn't solve the biggest problem that you have, which is the knowledge about the process and the data that reside in the individuals that are basically doing the paper moving from desk to desk, right? So again, given the fact that US Census tells us that 60% of federal employees are over the age of 45, so as you think about the exodus of the baby boomers within the workplace, you're racing against the clock in terms of making sure that you have a way of extracting that knowledge and making sure that you bake that into your operations.
Great. And those that are IT leaders in the room know this all too well about the data disconnect that we're living in. The data is just coming simply too fast. Whether you know it or not, everyone in this room right now is generating 1.7 megabytes of data every second. And the problem that presents for any business is you just can't scale with that. And you don't need it all, to be honest. So the challenge then becomes, as a business, as an agency, how do I understand the right data that I need to serve my agency and that individual at any given moment? And how do I access that? How do I bring it together, knowing that it is incomplete, it is inconsistent, it is disjointed across touch points, across interactions. So you have some challenges you're going to need to overcome. And of course, these are some of the breakdowns. We're going to talk about the ways you can break through coming up.
So Doug talked a little bit earlier about this heavy investment in terms of mainframe systems and whatnot, right? So one of the things that he used to tell me is, Cobalt developers are in high demand right now, right? So maybe instead of learning Ruby Rails or whatever the new technology of the day is, I think he's sending his daughter to learn Cobalt, right, Doug? So, so the challenge with these legacy systems is the fact that they continue to reinforce this idea of silos, right? An application that is separate from agency to agency when inherently there's a lot of commonality that's shared in terms of the data, the process within those applications, right? In addition to that, you still have the data lake problem, where you constantly change, create new databases, and you're copy and pasting from one place to another, but at the end of the day, you still don't have insights into the small data, which is information about your constituents that you may or may not be collecting. And the other issue is that you'll continue to basically, due to these legacy issues, you're not able to get to a real-time interaction. So a lot of the data and the interactions are more batch-oriented rather than a live, experience. And last but not least, because of technologies like mainframe as well as proprietary custom development technologies, what ends up happening is all those processes, the data, and the intelligence reside within the code, right? So every time that you need to modify an application, it's kind of like doing open heart surgery, right? You got to go into every single code base and try to figure out, okay, so where do I need to modify? And God forbid that I didn't break anything in the process.
So I saw a lot of heads nodding throughout that section. So these are some of the challenges that we're trying to overcome. And let's take a minute then to say, well, what are we chasing? What are we trying to achieve? And do we have anyone in the audience from New York State at all? One in the back? Couple here? I don't know if you recognize that picture. This is a town called Seneca Falls, New York. And Seneca Falls, New York is pretty famous for you recognize, okay? It's pretty famous for two reasons. The first of which is it's where you're going to find the National Women's Hall of Fame. And they're actually moving into a great new facility. It's an old mill. It's absolutely beautiful. And it's a treasure for the town. The other interesting thing about that, if you look close at the picture as it transitions, you're going to maybe recognize what the transition is. It was the inspiration, Seneca Falls, for the town of Bedford Falls in the movie It's a Wonderful Life. And in fact, you'll find that they take it to heart. There's a hotel called the Clarence, and you'll find the bridge there, and it's quite a production they do around Christmas time. And the reason I bring this up is if you kind of want to put a picture in your head of what we're trying to achieve. Remember George when he walked around town? If you look at this picture, if he went to any government agency in that town, guess what they knew George? They knew the moment he walked up, probably why he was walking up and about to start that interaction. They knew probably his state of affairs. They knew if he had kids that were going to go to college, what year they were in, probably what grade they got in math. All right, there's a relationship, there's a recognition of you individually, a memory of you individually. And what happened in the movie, of course, is, well, that all went away. And every time in the alternate reality he interacted, it was like no one knew him. He went into places that he'd frequent, he had to introduce himself. And all too often, businesses can feel like that, and agencies alike. When you're interacting, it's like, well, I've already given you that data, didn't I? I already entered that information. Why is it that I'm entering it again? As if you don't even know me at all, and making me go through these processes. And it's like we're in that alternate reality, and it's just the way it is until now. Right? You have the ability to change that. So let's use this as inspiration. Now, are we really going to be It's a Wonderful Life and George Bailey? Maybe not. But this is a nice rosy picture if you want to put it in your head. But it's more than memory. The way I describe it is we want to be able to humanize government. And memory is just one piece of this. And if we look to humans for inspiration as to our abilities, as to the types of characteristics and traits that we need to take on as agencies, as businesses. And the first one I'd argue is, can we look to a human's ability to be aware? There's an ability that we all have to continuously sense and observe our surroundings without even thinking about it. Right now, whether you're listening, and if you can imagine, this is a pretty full room, and in a few minutes we're all going to be in the break area, and you're all going to be talking. It's going to get pretty loud. And it's going to be, think of that as a lot of big data. All the noise flying in all directions, and you're trying to focus on the conversation right there. And how do you detect what's important? Let me ask you this. Who here in the room is a parent? Has kids? Okay, so I'd like you to imagine now that in that same break room with all that noise, that your kid is in there. And I'd argue if they shouted your name, that they needed help, I guarantee you'd hear them. Across all that big data, you'd pull that out. I'd probably put money on that. That's because whether we know we're always aware, we're listening for moments of need as humans. But as businesses, all too often we just schedule, let's push data over here, let's push it over there. We're not really listening for a constituent's moment of need and doing it in a way that is sensing, not scheduling. This is the type of ability that we're going to talk about today that you can bring to bear by listening to data, changes in data. This can be done. The next ability is understanding, empathy. Can we empathize with the situational context of an individual and their journey, not their account status? This is a very different thing. United Healthcare Global, UHG Global, one of our customers, does a great job of this. And what really impressed me is they actually built a process By the way, this is a company that when you travel, you have insurance, and if you have an incident, you get in a car accident, something happens, they have to kick in and take care of you. The first step in that process that they built in our solution is actually called empathy. It says, can we not ask for the member's number first and validate that? Can we actually understand, how do we help this person now? How do we understand who are their family members that we need to get in touch with right now? And how do we make sure that we're doing the best we can for this individual in this moment and make that job one? The rest takes care of itself. They have processes to support that. Empathy is a key piece that I encourage all businesses, all agencies to implement in their processes. Of course, we need to take responsibility. If we're on the hook, we have to get the job done. And yes, increasingly, we have to get it done more and more efficiently. This comes to a term called orchestration. And this is the big gap that exists across every organization that has lots of data, lots of touch points. The missing gap isn't that you don't have enough channel, it's the space in between. It's the ability to orchestrate the right thing across of all those things. Take responsibility in getting it done, not leaving it to manual processes and people remembering to do things. We're humans. We don't always remember the right thing, okay? And the last one is the ability to learn and adapt. As humans, we're just always learning. I argue every day that we exist, we learn a little bit from the prior day. We're hopefully a little bit smarter every day in some way, shape, or form. And we're continuing that experience onward and onward and onward and onward. We're always learning. And there are new techniques, such as AI, machine learning, and others that you can bring to bear to make it not just a scheduled event, and to run reports, my gosh, at the end of a month and a quarter. That's not learning. To make it inherent across the entire organization, to continue to learn from every interaction, to make the next interaction smarter. You can do this. It is now practical and possible to do these things. And if you look at these elements here on humanizing government, Anna from the VA is going to come on a little later on, and her story, to me, rings true for a lot of these characteristics up here. And it's a great story, and I think you're going to get a lot out of it. So let's pivot now, with that kind of in our sights, to what do we do?
So when we think about technology, right, you can actually use it to differentiate or actually try to keep up with all of the emerging technologies and causing you to fail. So we begin with this idea of insight, right? So there's a lot of dimensions within insight. And insights begins with understanding what is actually happening. Having that knowledge extracted from all these manual and paper processes that you're talking about is a key step to making sure that you essentially understand what is it that you're trying to achieve with all these different processes. In addition to that, once you can define what these processes are and all the different dimensions of the work that's involved here, then you can start to apply analytics on top of the small data that you have, so that now you're not just doing things for the sake of doing things, right? Now you're actually applying insights and actually gaining knowledge from all of the data, all of the process, and the people that you have to do the work. Next slide. So obviously automation is very, very important. But one of the things that we want to talk about here is don't just automate to increase, to reduce cost, but really automate for an outcome. You're going to hear a little bit later from New Jersey courts talking about how by automating tasks in support of their staff, so specifically the officers and the judges that are involved in the parole process, they're essentially empowering the customer, which is the incarcerated individual at this point, right? So again, automate those tasks that create an impact that lead to your outcome, rather than just a quick way to gain cost savings and increase efficiency.
Here, I'll give you the clicker just so it's easier to forward.
Great. And another key thing to this is, technologies are great, right? You have all these data stores, you have all these processes, and you even have artificial intelligence. But the problem is you need to be able to govern them, right? We hear about technology such as the racist chatbot. AI can go bad, right? So you want to make sure that you have a way of controlling all these new technologies, but also have a way of managing your data, making sure that you know at any given moment how that data is being used, where does it reside, and being able to keep up with change. And how do you bridge these silos that I just talked about that's created by all these different legacy investments as well as the processes that you have? So you definitely want to bridge them and prevent new ones. Now we have a concept at Pega that we call situational layer cake, which is also a patented architecture. But the idea here is that you want to start thinking about things across your organization that has commonality. And the way to think about this model is it's actually multidimensional. There's the people, the process, and also the data, as well as the user interface that you use to expose the experience to your constituents. So if we look at this idea where, say for example, due to a new piece of regulation that you have, you're actually rolling out a couple of new programs. And the program actually is meant to serve the unemployed as well as some of the elderly. But you've been asked to provide special considerations for a particular group of constituents around the veterans. So if you think about being able to build the same interface that services all these different programs, but with variations perhaps around the steps within the process for just the VA constituents, this kind of an architecture whereby you essentially abstract the data, you abstract the rules, you abstract the process, and you abstract the user interface allows you to be able to specialize when you need to specialize, but also be able to share existing applications and process that you've already built. And this architecture with this framework is so powerful that I might have provided a government example here, but it's being used throughout all of the different industries that we serve within Pega. As an example, we are able to help AIG consolidate 55 separate claim systems, servicing over 100 plus countries into one system. So let's switch gears and talk a little bit about how do we actually transform the service.
Right. There is a sea change happening right now in customer service. And it is about digital. And a lot of the things we introduced in the prior slide, awareness, empathy, situational context, continuous learning, adapting, orchestration, all these things. The way I'd like to depict it, and this will build here, is that think of that moment of need we talked about. When your constituents need you, whatever that is. And it's going to be different for each of your agencies. All too often we think of it, well, they'll call us and we'll do the best we can. We've got great staff. We're going to do the best we can to help them. But you're always facing that pressure upon efficiency. How do you get more out of less? Well, the challenge is if we're just focusing there on solving it in the call center or in our locations and branches and offices, we're solving the wrong problem. You're never going to be able to get everything out of that. Instead, you're going to see a bit of an animation here. We can use digital and transform the way that interaction feels to actually reduce the volume to that call center entirely. Isn't the best way to optimize our call centers is to not have that call in the first place? Or at least to start that conversation elsewhere and be almost done by the time it reaches that? And that's what this depiction is all about. Let me walk you through what you're looking at. At the upper right, the IVR. We talked earlier on how it's one of the biggest frustrations right now of your constituents, that they're stuck in this IVR, and it's this constant waiting room, an endless circle of press 1 for, press 2 for, and it's not really built around their journey. One of the hottest conversations that we're having right now, particularly in industries such as healthcare, such as telecommunications, and others, is the concept of intelligent IVR. And the concept is to take all that intelligence that you heard Ying talk about, the rules, the orchestration, the logic that guide your CSRs as to what we think of the next best action to take, the next best conversation, a guided conversation. That's how we can optimize your call centers. Those same rules and logic can now simply be pointed into the IVR and guided individually. So that quite literally the same questions you would be asked in that contact center are now being asked upstream in the IVR. We're beginning that conversation earlier. And if it doesn't get resolved in the IVR, which most won't be fully resolved, by the time they get to your contact center, guess what? they're already far along that path to completion. You end up with shorter conversations, more efficient, and for your constituents, their journey, a faster resolution. And it's one of the most interesting things now, because it takes a channel which is thought of as an old channel, ineffective channel, a valueless channel for a constituent, and turns it into something of value. It resolves the issue for them. So remember we talked about the 3 E's? Where we can actually solve effectiveness, efficiency, and experience in one fell swoop. Those are the golden opportunities. This is one great example. And if you're not doing this today and not looking at it, this is a great opportunity for you. As you move upstream, your assisted channels where agents can handle multiple at a time, things like chat and Twitter and social and things like that, those are other great mechanisms for you to serve versus that contact center. And on the upper side, self-service. I think we all agreed earlier on, this is what we want. We reach out to those self-service channels first, and we have to do a better job of servicing up those interactions better. And that's where you're going to see those virtual chatbots and other things there. And we are seeing a lot of interest right now in that type of technology, if it can only be made more human. It can't feel impersonal. And that's the challenge and opportunity for those in the room. Now, here's where it gets interesting. As you're seeing in black here, this says responsive service. It's almost, as great as this sounds, this is just us sitting around waiting for an issue. And our constituents have to call us up or reach out to us. Here's where it's all going. A concept called proactive servicing, where we're sensing those moments of need as they're happening in data, big data, small data, fast-moving data, slow-moving data, because we're listening and we're aware. And as these context changes, as we see things happening, we can reach out digitally. We can certainly call them if we wanted to. Wouldn't it be better if we just sent them a text? Hey, we noticed you haven't registered for the program that you register every year until now. Would you like us to add you to the list? Or would you like us to send you a link to complete that? That's a simple example, right? We can do these things. Doesn't it make sense that would avert the call later on to say, hey, I missed my deadline and can you add me back to the program? You can't. Again, it's in the data. These are things we can orchestrate and solve. A big win for your constituents, a big win for your business and your agency. Now, there's another step after this. As you're seeing here, the moment of need is happening and everything is happening to the right. The next wave after this is something called preemptive service. And this is where we're using more sophisticated techniques typically, AI, machine learning that we talked about earlier, to make broader correlations across data and sense someone trending toward a moment of need when they may need a government service, and then reaching out to try and help them before they might even know that there's a need. And aren't those the best experiences out there? And aren't they the best for you and for your constituents? And we're happy to engage with you as to where those opportunities might be, and as well as our partners that you're seeing just down the hall. So this is where it's all heading. Now, what you're seeing here, though, is that there's a number of different channels at play. All right, this can create complexity. Here, and what I'll convey is that here's how it should feel. As you look at the US, we have 48 contiguous states. And they're not separated by water, basically. And the problem is, right now, our channels are separated by a lot of water. As you move across your phone, to your web, to your mobile app, there's a lot of water in between. And it should feel like a contiguous interaction. And to paint a picture, think of yourself driving down that road. And you're crossing over from one state to the next. Did you feel it in the car? No, it's one seamless piece of road. But the speed limit just changed, a lot of things just changed. That's how it should feel as your constituents move across channels. They should be able to go to that web self-service that we talked about earlier, and not just start filling in a form digitally, but if they have to move over to a contact center to complete it, they should be able to pick up right where they left off. Contiguous, just as if you were driving on a seamless piece of road. And that's what you can do. Technology now exists that you can actually do this. It doesn't have to be a disconnected experience anymore. This is the opportunity. And when we talk about terms, like we're going to talk about later today, we're going to have a great session on something called omnichannel. I want you to take a step back and ask what you're really trying to solve. The term omnichannel, quite literally, means every channel. Omni means every. Who here thinks they can solve every channel right away? No one. Not any industry can solve every channel. And guess what? There's a new channel that's going to be around tomorrow that wasn't here today, and the day after that, and the day after that. So that's why you can see them almost too big to solve. It's one of the reasons why people might be sitting back. How do I solve omnichannel? Another way to think about this is a different phrase right here. You need to be creating experiences that are channelless. Channelless. It should feel like it's one. You're consuming it through channels. Let me give you some examples. Those examples we talked about earlier, the Amazon experience is where we start an interaction on a tablet in the morning, we pick up our phone in the afternoon, and it's right where we left off. We do the same. Facebook, we're consuming it through channels. We can consume it through certainly our mobile app. I would argue it's not actually a website anymore or an app. You can consume it through your TV, if you have a smart TV. You can consume it through certain vehicles, through the telematics system. On and on. And your watch, if you happen to have a fancy Samsung or Apple Watch. You're consuming it through channels. So the experience we want to create is one that's channelless. Yeah? And the way we do that is by, as you're seeing on the right-hand side, the answer is not to keep doing things the way we've been doing it, which is to build logic in our email system, to build logic in our call center system, to build logic in our email, well, our web environment, okay, and on and on. That's kind of why we're in the problem that we're in. You want to extract that logic centrally and think of yourself as kind of that Facebook, the Amazon. You're channelless. Your logic is central, and the AI just learns, and it knows the right thing to do. And whether it's consumed over the mobile app or the web, or the rules in the contact center, or that intelligent IVR we talked about, it's all feeling like one. You're solving one problem. It's much easier to solve that. Then the channels just become means of consumption and execution. It's a new way of thinking, but that's the great opportunity everyone in the room has. And this is the transformation that's happening right now. By the way, organizations like Sprint are taking this on, and they're implementing, we think of it as an always-on digital customer brain right there in the center where the insight is. And it's guiding every interaction. And they wanted to solve retention. That was their big issue. What was so interesting in this use case to me is it may seem like this is a big problem to solve, and it takes a long time. And a lot of things can take a long time. This is not. They were up and running, I think it was 13 weeks, live in production from start to finish, and made an immediate reduction to their churn rates. 10% reduction, which I don't know how much you guys follow the telecommunications industry, but this is huge. Because it's a new form of insight, a new way of thinking to guide every interaction, not just thinking about segments. And it completely transformed the business. They're now at their lowest rate of churn in their company's history. We're talking about transformative stuff. Now, this is what we mean about being empowered, government empowered. Everyone in the room has the opportunity here.
So you're probably thinking now, geez, you know, all those fancy channels you're talking about, Jeff, and all these new experiences. You're not talking about the elephant in the room. I've got legacy investments. So here are some ways to help you kind of look at those legacy investments a little bit differently. So we're going to start with the data, actually. So, you know, I'm sure there's tons of databases, right? You've got lots of data stores, you've got databases, you've got data that's your system of record. You have data that's coming in from your third-party applications. You have data are essentially coming from external sources. And with the rise of IoT, right, that's another form of big data. So you've got data everywhere, right? And so at Pega, one of the things that, you know, we're thinking about is how do we help customers really manage the interactions, right? So how do you define which specific applications, which process should have access to which data resources? And being able to visually map these data resources and have the data model represented in the context of the application. That's really, really important, right? So if you think about something as simple as being asked the question, where are all of the places within your agency you're collecting Social Security number? How many of you feel like you can answer that question without taking on a multi-year or multi-month IT project? Almost no one, right? It's probably going to need a business analyst to go audit the applications. You're going to need a DBA or a couple of DBAs who happens to be sitting around, right? Because we have so many IT resources just sitting around within agencies. We don't, right? And so being able to have visibility into where the data resources are being consumed, and not just within the application itself, but the presentation. what if you are asked not only where do you collect, where are all the applications that you're collecting Social Security number, but you're being asked to mask the actual collection. So now, how many more years do we just add on to this project, right? And when are you going to be able to get this prioritized up the stack in terms of other priorities, other regulatory changes that you have to deal with? So again, this idea of being able to visually see the connections between all of the data sources, not just to the applications, but actually at the user interface level, and being able to influence the maintenance and the upkeep of that is really, really important. And at Pega, we have this live data concept, right? Where we essentially have this data extraction layer that you can manage through a visual tool that allows our customers to be able to manage their data and provide that compliance and transparency. And of course, you need to connect to these legacy data stores, right? So we obviously have the ability to support connectors, APIs, but one of the, the use cases of robotic automation that people don't often talk about is bridging those mainframe systems that don't have user interfaces, right? So again, keep that in mind as you think about your arsenal of how do you maximize your data resources. So you probably already have made a lot of investments in terms of your digital assets, right? At this point, you probably already have a website or several websites. You probably have multiple mobile applications. So one of the ideas that we like to suggest is thinking about, as you build new capability, what if you were to leverage this concept of mashup? So for us, it's basically embedding these features that you created or new applications in the context of your existing digital asset. So don't rebuild your website, don't rebuild your mobile application, but add in these new features using this mashup concept. Next. And of course, we talked about, a big gap in terms of delivering on the customer experience is how do you empower your staff to be able to do their job better and be able to be more empathetic to your constituents when they call. And part of that is also understanding what are the obstacles that they're running into. So really undertaking an effort to understand what are the processes that your staff is using, what are some of the technologies, what are the applications. And at Pega, we have this concept of workforce intelligence, whereby we can understand from a user perspective when they're on their desktop, what is it that they're doing? What are the applications that they're using? How long are they having trouble in going between different applications? And being able to figure out essentially the cow path, right? Where are they running into problems? And then picking that and then basically injecting the same robotic automation that you might be using in a straight-through processing style, but injecting that automation actually at the point of the desktop, where you simplify the experience for your staff. Again, that's another great way to increase productivity and really help out the people who are really your delivery vehicle of this great customer service to your constituents.
So we've given you some interesting things, hopefully, to think about. And you're going to be hearing more about these throughout the day. These themes are going to be coming up again and again. And it may seem a little bit large. And hopefully, one of the things you're going to leave today with it is that you don't have to solve it all right away. And it reminded me of this particular billboard. I'm from Boston. And I remember that around the time of the big dig, as I was driving into Boston, I saw this billboard. And there's one grainy photo that that I was able to find. And it said this: Rome wasn't built in a day. If it were, we would have hired their contractor. And I thought that was quite clever. And what this means to the folks in this room is that, look, you do need to take on digital transformation. You need to do all these great things and solve the 3 E's that we talked about. But you're not going to get there overnight, and that's okay. But you do have to get going. And hopefully we're going to give you ways that you can act on immediately, these quick wins that you can implement right now in multiple pieces of strategies that you can take month after month after month to get to your goal. And that's what it's about, moving forward, because you're doing the right things, not just doing lots of things, okay? You can get there. So to that point, we're going to bring it to a close here, and it's about your own journey. okay? And we want to talk about assembling your action plan. What do you do next with this information? The first thing I'd like to challenge is that tomorrow, when you go back to your job, don't just go back to your job. Engage with your own agency. Be the experience of your constituent. We're often very close to it. It happens in every business, every organization. Take a step back. Phone the call center and see what that experience is like. Go to your website and try to identify and try and solve a problem that you think your constituent might want to solve. Common one, an outlier, doesn't matter. Engage with your own agency. Take a step back and just see what happens. Next.
So by the way, it's not a typo. We intentionally say you own because we want you to feel empowered to own this journey, right? So, or that could be just a good explanation of the typo. But anyway, so in terms of the next 30 days, one of the key things that I want, there's a lot of steps that you can take, but I think the important thing is to take the lesson from those that you're going to hear later, from the VA as well as from New Jersey courts and some of our partners here, is defining your outcome. Once you know what the outcome is that you're trying to achieve, whether it's to make sure that our veterans are well taken care of, that the vendors and those that are engaged in providing the service are properly compensated, or making sure that tax dollars are being spent effectively and making sure that there's accuracy. Whatever those goals are, once you've defined what your priorities, make sure that you map those outcomes to those goals that you want to achieve, because then that could really guide your priority in terms of what you go after, because you can go after a lot of things. No, I'm doing that too. So 90 days, right? So I think there's a lot of popular concept within the Agile world talking about lean startup as well. So you create this build, measure, and learn loop. And so I think in our day and age of technology, moving so fast as well as needing to deliver on a lot of these capabilities fast, we like to encourage you that the same exercises that you did maybe 30 days ago, keep repeating them, right? Identify some quick wins, do them, measure them, see how well they're carrying out, and then repeat. Go back and revisit how well you've done and accomplished these goals.
And the final thing we want to leave you with is that what do you do today? Just get inspired. You're going to hear from a lot of great speakers today. And hopefully we're going to continue to challenge your thinking in a number of ways and give you ideas that you can take back. And the goal here, as you can see, is in big letters, feel empowered. This is about giving you things that you can use. And hopefully we're going to achieve that for you today. And the last thing I'll leave you with is get out there and vote. Yes. Whoever you're going to vote for, get out there and vote. And thank you very much for coming, everyone. And I'll pass it back.